Sometimes it's not life that breaks you. It's your mind. It's not the facts, but the interpretation. It's not what happened to you, but what your heart has not yet been able to let go of. It's not the original pain, but the layers of thoughts your mind builds around it. There is a form of suffering that makes no noise outwardly, but screams silently from within. It's that mental fatigue that stays with you even after the day is over. It's that feeling of being trapped in your own thoughts. It is that internal spiral in which you return again and again to the same wounds, the same fears, the same memories that can no longer be changed. It's that moment when you ask yourself, why do I still feel this way if it's already over? Buddhism teaches that human suffering does not originate from the external world, but from the internal world. It stems from attachment, resistance, refusal to accept what is, and identification with pain. It is born when you become a slave to your mind, instead of becoming its master. The mind is a powerful tool, but without guidance, it becomes a labyrinth. And in that labyrinth, it's easy to get lost. Getting lost in thoughts that hurt you. Getting lost in emotions you don't know how to manage. Getting lost in expectations that are never met. To get lost even in the idea of what you should be. There comes a time in life when it is no longer the world that hurts you. It is you who continues to hurt yourself with your interpretation of the world. And that process is so subtle, so silent, so constant, that it can accompany you for years without you even noticing. Have you ever felt like your greatest enemy lives inside your head? Are your own thoughts what exhaust you? Does sadness not come from outside, but from something internal that you can't find a way to heal? No matter what you do, does your mind keep returning to what hurts you? This suffering is an internal construct, and precisely for that reason, it can also be undone from within. The mind that built pain can build peace. A mind that has interpreted life in one way can learn to interpret it in another. The mind that clung to the past can learn to let go. The mind that hurt you can become your ally. Buddhism does not promise a life without pain. It promises a mind capable of not becoming its prisoner. The first step in healing your mind is realizing that there is a distance between what happens and what you think about it. That distance is crucial. It is the space that separates reality from suffering. The reality is what happened. Suffering is what your mind does with what happened. And between the two, there is a space that, if you learn to inhabit it, can transform your life. Imagine a completely calm lake. The surface reflects everything clearly. The sky, the mountains, the trees. That lake is your mind in its natural state. Clara, deep, peaceful, lucid. Now imagine that the wind starts to blow. Then you throw stones into the water. Then you run around creating waves. Then you wave a stick inside the lake. Do you see it? The surface is distorted. The shapes become distorted. Clarity disappears. The thing is, life isn't the one throwing all those stones. Many times it's you. Your attachment to what once was. Your fear of what might be. Your resistance to accepting what is. Your need to control the uncontrollable. Your habit of overthinking. Your tendency to fight against emotions that only need to be understood. Every agitated thought is a falling stone. Every painful memory you recycle is a new wave. Every anticipated fear is a blowing wind. Each inner rejection is a stick that stirs the bottom. And then you wonder why you can't see clearly. Why can't you rest? Why can't you feel peace? The agitated mind cannot see the world as it is. It only sees the distorted reflection of its own internal movement. The path to healing does not begin with complicated techniques, rituals, or secret mantras. It begins with a simple yet transformative recognition. Your inner suffering stems from the story your mind is telling right now. And that story can be changed. It can be made more flexible. It can be observed without being believed. It can cease to have power over you. Healing begins when you realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes them. You're the one who sees them go by. You are the one who can change history. You are the one who can choose not to react. You are the space, not the content. That inner space, that deep silence that exists behind words, behind emotions, behind mental chaos, is where true healing begins. Buddhism calls it the original mind, the part of you that has not been touched by pain, fear, guilt, or the past. It's there, untouched, waiting for you to return. And to return, you will have to learn the first key that can transform your relationship with inner suffering. A key that, although it may seem simple, is the root of all mental healing. The first key, the root from which all mental healing is born, is something that almost no one practices because it goes against what we were taught from childhood. We were taught to react immediately, to solve, to suppress, to escape, to distract ourselves, to fight against what we feel. But Buddhism teaches something completely different, something that seems contradictory but is profoundly liberating. To heal your mind, you first have to learn to stop fighting against it. Resistance is the food of suffering. When you reject a thought, that thought becomes stronger. When you try not to feel an emotion, that emotion grows. When you fight against your mind fights against you. And in that fight, you always lose. Internal suffering does not arise because you have negative thoughts. It arises because you don't know how to relate to them without identifying with them. The mind produces thoughts like the heart produces heartbeats. It's not personal. It's not intentional. He's not your enemy. It is simply activity, movement, mental energy in action. But you learned from a young age that negative thinking is a threat, something you must eliminate as soon as possible. You try not to think about it. You try to avoid it. You try to distract yourself. You try to replace it with another one. You try to do everything except what really works. Observe it without resisting. When you resist, you suffer. When you observe, you free yourself. Imagine you are sitting next to a river. The water flows. Bring leaves, branches, flowers, foam, remnants of the forest. You see everything that happens. You don't get it. You don't push her. You don't stop her. You don't make it yours. You just see her pass by. That's how the mind works. Each thought is a leaf that turns away. Each emotion is a flowing current. Each memory is a branch that comes from afar. Every fear is a shadow that is reflected for an instant and then disappears. But what do most people do? Try to grab everything. Try to stop the flow. Try to control the river. Try to draw conclusions from everything that the current carries. And so they end up exhausted, confused, suffering over stories that aren't even real. Buddhism teaches that suffering does not come from the river. It comes from clinging to what flows through it. The mind doesn't need you to fight against it. She needs you to listen to her without making her movement your identity. The thought says, "You are not enough." And you suffer because you believe that phrase is you. But that phrase is just a passing page. It has no power if you don't grab it. It has no roots if you don't water it. It has no weight if you don't make it part of your story. The thought goes, what if everything goes wrong? And you suffer because you immerse yourself in that mental movie, forgetting that it is not reality, but only an imagined future. The thought says, "I can't take it anymore." And you suffer because you believe that phrase determines your destiny, when it is merely a temporary reflection of the emotional exhaustion you are feeling. The key is this: observe. Don't fight. Look. Don't identify yourself. Allow it. Don't cling to it. When something in your mind becomes painful, it doesn't mean you have to eliminate it. It means you have to stop giving it power. The power you believe the mind has over you does not come from the mind. It comes from your identification with it. Zen says, thoughts are guests. You are the house. Who suffers more? The house that allows guests to come and go, or the house that tries to force them out and ends up breaking down from within? When you start practicing this first key, something begins to change inside you. Mental noise doesn't disappear immediately, but it stops threatening you. Negative thoughts may still appear, but stop letting them paralyze you. The painful emotion arises, but it doesn't consume you. The wound is activated, but it no longer directs your life. You feel a small interior space, a breather, a distance between you and your mind, a clarity that wasn't there before. That space is the gateway out of suffering. It is a reminder that you are not the content of your mind. You are the consciousness that can observe everything without being swept away. And when you reconnect with that consciousness, with that inner observer, with that part of you that is beyond thought, the second Buddhist key to healing your mind naturally emerges. A key that acts as a balm, as a gentle but profoundly transformative medicine for everything that still hurts inside you. There are wounds that don't heal because you haven't learned to touch them with the right touch. There are emotions you continue to carry because you've never faced them without fear. There are thoughts that still haunt you because you never observed them from the right perspective. It's not about ignoring what you feel, or repressing it, or pushing it away. It's about something much more subtle, much more human, much more transformative. The mind truly begins to heal when you learn the following key. Treat your inner world with the same compassion you would offer someone you love deeply. Most people are kind to others, but hard on themselves. You listen to a friend who is suffering. You hug a loved one who is crying. You understand someone who makes a mistake. You accompany those who are going through a bad time. But when you suffer, you attack yourself. When you fail, you judge yourself. When you cry, you criticize yourself. When you are afraid, you punish yourself. When you make a mistake, you demand perfection from yourself. When you carry pain, you tell yourself that you shouldn't feel this way. And that lack of inner compassion prolongs the suffering much longer than the original pain itself. Buddhism teaches that the mind becomes a habitable place when you treat it as you would treat someone vulnerable, someone hurt, someone who needs containment. Not from a commanding tone, but from a tone of presence. Not from a place of demanding, but from a place of understanding. Not from criticism, but from tenderness. There is a Zen principle that says, what you reject within yourself becomes stronger. What you embrace dissolves. Inner compassion does not mean justifying everything, nor does it mean avoiding growth. It means to stop fighting against yourself. It means talking to you like you would talk to someone you love. It means acknowledging your pain without turning it into a sentence. It means allowing yourself to be human without falling into guilt. It means accepting your shadows without turning them into your identity. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a child who has accumulated fear. You don't scold him for being afraid. You support him. You don't force him to overcome it. You accompany him. You don't shame him for crying. You listen to him. You don't force him to be strong. You remind him that you're there. This is how you should treat your inner world. Softly, with presence, with respect, patiently, with the certainty that no one grows up under punishment. The inner suffering is prolonged because you try to overcome it through harshness. But the soul, like a flower, only opens with the sun, not with pressure. When you bring compassion to your mind, something inside begins to loosen. Mental tension eases. The thought stops feeling like an attack. Emotion ceases to feel like an enemy. The wound ceases to feel like a sentence. And the most beautiful thing happens when you discover that compassion is not something you must achieve. It is something that already lives within you. You just have to direct it towards your own inner self. Look at yourself honestly. If someone spoke to you the way you sometimes speak to yourself, you wouldn't allow it. If someone judged your emotions the way you judge them, you would walk away. If someone invalidated your pain the way you invalidate it, your heart would break. So why do you allow yourself to treat yourself like this? Buddhism says that every hostile thought you have towards yourself is a weapon you are using without realizing it. But every kind word you speak to yourself is medicine for the soul. And that medicine is always available, even though you almost never use it. Inner compassion creates space, space to rest, a space to feel without fear, space to make mistakes without destroying yourself, space to observe without reacting, a space to heal without haste. When you begin to relate to yourself in this way, the wound begins to heal. Not because the pain disappears, but because it no longer hurts to be with you. You are no longer your own executioner. You are no longer your own enemy. You are no longer the voice that drags you down. You are the voice that holds you up. Suffering loses its power when one stops feeling alone. If you accompany your own mind, the mind stops hurting you. This inner compassion opens the door to an even greater transformation. Learning to accept what you experience without turning it into a burden, without turning it into guilt, without turning it into destiny. And from that deep acceptance, which is not resignation, but clarity, a third fundamental key is born that can completely change your relationship with life, with pain, and with yourself. Sometimes suffering doesn't come from what happened, but from the constant struggle you make to make reality different from what it is. You resist accepting what happened. You resist accepting what you feel. You resist accepting what you cannot control. You resist accepting that life won't always follow your plans. And that resistance, that internal struggle against the inevitable, is one of the deepest sources of human suffering. Not because life is cruel, but because you force yourself to live in war with what already exists. The mind begins to heal when you discover another essential key. Accept reality as it is before trying to change it. Accepting is not giving up. Accepting is not being passive. Accepting is not the same as approving of what hurt you. Accepting is not justifying the unjustifiable. Accepting is not allowing what you don't want in your life. Acceptance is seeing reality without filters, without distortions, without the stories your mind adds to protect or punish you. Acceptance is looking at the truth of the present without adding layers of the past or projections of the future. Acceptance is about ceasing to fight with something that has already happened, that is already here, that is already part of the now. Mental suffering arises when you wish that what is happening wasn't happening, when you wish that what already happened had never happened, when you try to erase emotions that already exist, when you fight against an unchangeable fact as if your resistance could alter it. Imagine you are standing in the rain. If you try to deny it, you'll get soaked. If you fight against it, you get tired. If you get angry with her, you'll still get wet. The rain doesn't change just because you resist it. The rain changes when it passes, not when you fight it. Acceptance is that internal gesture in which you say, "This is what we have now," not as resignation, but as clarity. And from that clarity, you can act. Buddhism teaches that acceptance is the gateway between suffering and serenity. Until you accept it, you are trapped in the past or in a fantasy. But when you accept, you return to the present. You return to the only place where you can transform yourself. Acceptance does not erase the pain, but it removes the double burden of fighting against it. It doesn't erase the fear, but it dissolves the story your mind builds around the fear. It doesn't erase the loss, but it prevents you from turning it into a ghost that haunts your life. It doesn't erase the past, but it prevents you from reliving it every day. Acceptance is a deep rest. You take a break from the struggle. You take a break from expectations. You take a break from perfection. You take a break from control. You get a break from wanting everything to be different. And when you rest, your mind releases the tension it has been accumulating for years. Zen compares acceptance to opening your hand. When you clench your fist tightly, it hurts. When you open it, the pain is relieved even though nothing external has changed. The reality remains the same. The fist is gone. The resistance is gone. To accept is to open your hand. Accept that you felt something you didn't understand. Accept that you made mistakes. Accept that others hurt you. Accept that you hurt too. Accept that you cannot change the past. Accept that you cannot control people. Accept that there are things you would have liked to be different, but they weren't. Acceptance doesn't erase what happened, but it allows you to start living without the emotional burden you were carrying. It allows you to update yourself. It allows you to breathe. The mind heals the moment it stops running away. Acceptance means staying in the present, even if the present hurts, because the only pain that heals is the one you face head-on. What you avoid becomes bigger. What you face transforms. What you accept becomes part of you. And when you integrate what you've lived, what you feel, and who you are now, a kind of clarity emerges that very few people experience. A clarity that allows you to see what part of the suffering comes from the world, and what part comes from your resistance. That clarity opens the door to an even deeper key, one that transforms the way you relate to your own story and can release years of accumulated emotional burden. There are wounds that never heal because you keep telling yourself the same story over and over. Stories born from pain, but which, over time, have become part of your identity. Stories that no longer describe what happened, but rather what your mind has repeated until it has become absolute. And perhaps without realizing it, you continue to live within a narrative that no longer serves you. The mind carries more burdens with the story it invents than with the fact that actually occurred. That's why there's another essential key to healing. Transform the internal story with which you interpret your life. You can't change the past, but you can change the meaning your mind gave it. That meaning is what binds you, what hurts you, what keeps you trapped. The event happened once. The mind relives it 1,000 times. Buddhism teaches that suffering does not arise from the event, but from the story. What hurts you is not that someone hurt you years ago, but that your mind keeps telling you that that wound defines who you are. What weighs on you is not the mistake you made, but that your mind insists that the mistake will stay with you forever. What limits you is not the abandonment you experienced, but that your mind turned it into proof that you do not deserve to be loved. The inner story is more powerful than the outer reality. If history says, "I'm not good enough," everything that happens to you will be filtered through that lens. If history says, "Nobody stays," you will interpret every gesture as confirmation. If history says, "I always fail," you'll fear every step. If history says, "I am not enough," you will accept less than you deserve. Your mind does not create external reality. It creates the meaning that determines how you experience it. You may not be able to control what others have done, but you can decide which story you will allow to continue directing your life. Inner transformation happens when you begin to ask yourself, is the story I tell myself true? Or is it just old? Does it free me? Or does it chain me? Does it allow me to grow? Or does it keep me in the same place? Much of the inner suffering stems from outdated stories that your mind continues to use as if they were current. Zen says that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional because it depends on the narrative you construct around that pain. You can't stop the rain from falling, but you can avoid building a storm inside yourself every time it rains. History can change when you look at it from a different perspective, not from the wound, but from consciousness, not from guilt, but from perspective, not from defeat, but from compassion. The story changes when you realize you survived, when you recognize the strength with which you carried on, when you realize that the wound wasn't your end, but your beginning, when you understand that what you experienced doesn't define you, but rather shaped you, when you discover that the fragility you felt was also the seed of your depth, when you accept that you are not the broken version that your mind has repeated for years. The past doesn't change, but you do. Your vision can indeed be transformed. Your interpretation can be renewed. Your story can be rewritten. What was once a wound can now become understanding. What was once a fall can now become clarity. What was once empty can now become space for something new. Healing begins with a profound inner decision. I will not repeat the story that hurts me. I will no longer feed a narrative that does not honor who I am today. I will not identify with what I was when I didn't yet know what I know now. The mind changes when you stop holding on to the story that keeps it trapped. And when that narrative transforms, everything else begins to align. Your emotions, your decisions, your relationships, your boundaries, your worldview, your perception of yourself. Sometimes you don't need to heal the wound. You need to heal the story that was born from it. And it is from this clarity that the next key emerges, one that deeply touches the human heart. How to free yourself from the past that you still carry within you, not by erasing it, but by relating to it in a completely new way. There is a type of suffering that doesn't come from the present, but from something much older. Something that isn't happening now, but that you continue to experience as if it just happened. It is the weight of a past that did not end inside you. It is the wound that no longer exists in the outside world, but continues to breathe in your inner world. Life has changed, but you still hold on to the same emotion. The situation is over, but your mind still relives it. The people are no longer here, but their shadows continue to talk to you. The decisions are in the past, but you continue to punish yourself for them. Healing the mind involves learning a new key, releasing the past so that it stops ruling your present. It's not about forgetting. It's not about erasing. It's not about pretending that nothing happened. It's about letting go of something your soul can no longer bear. The past weighs heavily because you carry it in the form of stories, interpretations, unprocessed wounds, and unaccepted emotions. It weighs on you because you store it in your emotional memory, not in your conscious memory. It's a burden because there's a part of you that continues to live in the place of pain, while another part tries to move forward. Your mind suffers because it's not all in the same place at the same time. A fragment remained trapped in what hurt you. Another projects himself towards a dreaded future. And only a small part lives in the present. Buddhism teaches that real life only happens in one place, here, now. Suffering occurs in the other two. What has already happened and what has not yet arrived. The reason the past continues to hurt is not because it is too strong, but because you keep returning to it in the same role you had when it hurt you. You look at it with the eyes of then, not with the awareness of now. You remember it from the perspective of the wound, not from the perspective of evolution. You embrace it from guilt, not from understanding. To free yourself from the past, you need to look at it from who you are today, not from who you were when it happened. Because today you see more, you feel different, you understand differently. You are someone greater than the version of yourself who lived through that moment. But you keep reliving the pain with old emotions that no longer belong to you. There is something liberating about understanding it. The past doesn't hurt because of what it was, but because of how you hold on to it now. The mind repeats what it has not understood. The wound returns when it was not listened to. The emotion returns when it was not fully felt. The memory persists when it still has something to teach you. You can't let go of something you haven't acknowledged. You can't close a door you never opened. You cannot heal a past that you deny or burden with guilt. Liberation begins when you allow yourself to feel what you didn't want to feel back then. When you look at pain without turning it into identity. When you acknowledge your fragility without turning it into a sentence. When you accept that you did the best you could with the awareness you had. Zen teaches that the past is like a cloud reflected in a lake. You can't touch her. You can't charge it. You cannot possess it. But you can stare at the churning water for years, believing that the cloud is still there. Until one day, you discover that it was only a reflection, not reality. Your mind is trapped not in the real past, but in its reflection. And that reflection dissolves the moment you decide to stop stirring the water. Letting go of the past is an act of love towards your present. It's understanding that you can't heal while you keep reliving the wound. It's accepting that you are no longer that person. It's giving yourself permission to move forward without carrying the burden of a story that has already ended. It's not about forgetting. It's about giving thanks and letting go. Be grateful for what made you more aware. Be grateful for what gave you depth. Be grateful for what showed you your strength. Be grateful even for what broke you, because from that crack sprang the light that guides you today. When you begin to let go of what no longer belongs to this moment, the mind becomes lighter. The present expands. The emotion softens. Thoughts become clearer. The wound integrates. Life feels available again. And from that inner lightness, an even more powerful key is born. How to change your relationship with pain itself, not to avoid it, but to transform it into a path towards clarity, presence, and liberation. There is a profound mistake that almost all of us make when we suffer. We believe that pain is an enemy from which we must escape. We tried to distract ourselves. We tried to suppress it. We try to keep busy with 1,000 things. We try to harden ourselves so we don't feel. We try to pretend that we're okay. We tried to make the pain disappear by force, and all of that only intensifies it. There is a key to Buddhism that very few people understand, but which has the power to completely transform the relationship you have with your mind. Pain is not the problem. The problem is your resistance to pain. Buddhism distinguishes between two types of suffering: inevitable pain and avoidable suffering. Inevitable pain is part of life: losing, failing, changing, letting go, making mistakes, growing. Avoidable suffering is the mental story you construct around that pain. The pain says, "This hurts." Suffering says, "This shouldn't be happening." The pain says, "This is difficult." Suffering says, "I can't bear it." The pain says, I am sad. Suffering says, I'll always be like this. Pain is a sensation. Suffering is a narrative. The mind heals when you learn to stop fighting against the natural pain of life. Not because you resign yourself, but because you discover something surprising. When you stop resisting pain, it loses most of its power. Imagine a hand tightly squeezing a rope. The rope is taut. It cuts the skin. It hurts. You can't untie the rope immediately, but you can stop tightening it. When you loosen up, the pain changes. It doesn't disappear, but it doesn't hurt you in the same way anymore. This is how your mind works. The problem is not that you feel sadness, fear, or anxiety. The problem is the tension your mind creates around those emotions. Zen teaches that all emotions have a natural cycle. They appear, reach a peak, and then dissolve. The only thing that keeps them alive longer than necessary is your stamina. When you say, I don't want to feel this, the emotion grows. When you say, this is too much, the emotion expands. When you say, I should be over it by now, the emotion lingers. When you say, this can't happen to me, the emotion gets blocked and trapped. Emotion doesn't ask you to understand it. It asks you to go through it. Ask for space. He demands attention. It asks permission to exist long enough to complete itself. Pain, when consciously felt, is a sign, a guide, an inner voice that shows you what part of you needs attention. He doesn't come to destroy you. He comes to awaken you. Trying not to feel it is like covering up an alarm that's going off to protect you. You cover up the sound, but you don't solve the cause. When you allow yourself to feel without resistance, something extraordinary happens. The emotion begins to change on its own. Sadness turns into clarity. Fear becomes information. Anxiety is converted into available energy. Guilt becomes responsibility. Pain becomes a teacher. Observe this paradox. When you escape from pain, it pursues you. When you look at it, it transforms. That transformation does not come from analyzing, understanding, or fighting. It comes from allowing. Allowing pain doesn't mean getting trapped in it. It means letting go of chasing it yourself. It means feeling it without turning it into an identity. It means listening to him without judging him. It means acknowledging it without dramatizing it. It means allowing it to pass through your body and mind without putting chains on it. The emotion that is allowed to flow. The emotion that is repressed remains. The emotion that is embraced matures. Emotion that is denied becomes entrenched. And when you learn to feel without resistance, to make space for pain instead of hardening yourself against it, your mind becomes a safe place, even in difficult times. Internal suffering decreases because your relationship with pain changes. It is no longer a threat. He's no longer an enemy. It is no longer a punishment. It's just a sign that something inside you is crying out for light. And when you can feel without fear, life will no longer break you from within. Because even difficult moments become a journey, not a destination. From this gentleness, from this ability to allow without clinging, to feel without destroying yourself, the final key is born, the one that gives meaning to everything before, and that closes the path to mental healing. How to inhabit the present with such clarity that your mind no longer finds space to build unnecessary suffering. There is a point on the path where it is no longer just about ceasing to fight with the mind, developing compassion for your inner world, accepting reality as it is, transforming the story you tell yourself, or releasing the past you still breathe. There is a point where healing ceases to be an intellectual or emotional process and becomes a state of presence, a different way of living life, a completely new way of relating to yourself. Buddhism sums it up in a simple yet immense teaching. You can only heal when you learn to fully inhabit the present. The mind suffers because it lives in places where you no longer are. Relive the past, anticipate the future, imagine scenarios, repeat stories, analyze, compare, fear. But life is not there. Life is here, at this very moment, in this breath, in this body, at the moment. Inner suffering does not come from what is happening now, but from what your mind is bringing from another time. Presence is the sacred act of returning to the only place where pain can be transformed, the now. Not the now as a philosophical concept, but as a lived experience. The now where you breathe, the now where you feel, the now where your body exists, the now where life really happens. When you are present, the mind cannot drag you to the past. When you are present, the future stops casting shadows. When you are present, thought loses its hold on your identity. When you are present, emotion flows without getting stuck. When you are present, the body becomes an anchor that brings you back to reality. When you are present, anxiety dissolves because it cannot survive in a space where it has nowhere to lean on. Zen says, pain exists. Suffering cannot exist in the present. Suffering needs history. It needs time. It needs past or future. You need to mentally step away from the present moment. But presence brings you back to your center, and in that center, the mind no longer dominates you. It calms down. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a restless animal that has been running for years without stopping. Always alert, always anticipating, always analyzing. If you try to stop him by force, he becomes desperate. But if you observe it tenderly, if you give it space, if you let it tire itself out without chasing it, little by little it will approach you. He gradually rests. He gradually calms down. This is how presence works. It doesn't force. It accompanies. It does not fight. It invites. It doesn't repress. It embraces. Presence is the home your mind returns to when it can no longer bear the weight of its own thoughts. When you breathe consciously, even for just a few seconds, something changes. The noise decreases. The tension eases. The story loses its power. The emotion becomes lighter. The body relaxes. The soul feels at last heard. Presence is the point where healing ceases to be a wish and becomes a real experience. Because when you are in the present, you are no longer holding on to the past. When you are in the present, you are no longer carrying the future. When you are in the present, the mind no longer has room to build suffering. The moment now is so small, so delicate, so perfect, that there is no room for anguish within it. Anxiety comes from accumulation. Now is simple. Presence doesn't require your life to be perfect. It requires that you be here. Go back to your body. Feel the air coming in and going out. Feel your feet on the ground. That you return to the sensation of the chest, of the skin, of silence. May you rest for a moment from the weight of your thoughts. Sometimes you heal not because you find a great spiritual answer, but because you allow yourself to be for a moment without thinking about anything at all. That second of emptiness, that second of pause, that second of clarity. That is the gateway to a freer mind. Healing is not a final destination. It's a way of walking. It's a way of looking at things. It's a way of breathing. It's a way of living from the inside out. And when you understand this, you discover something they never told you. Your mind doesn't need to be perfect to be at peace. It needs to be accompanied. You need presence, not pressure. He needs understanding, not judgment. He needs space, not confinement. It needs truth, not repeated stories. She needs your hand, not your rejection. Healing does not mean forgetting the pain, but rather ceasing to multiply it. It doesn't mean erasing the mind, but knowing how to sustain it. It doesn't mean not feeling, but feeling with presence. It does not mean eliminating thought, but not turning it into identity. Healing is coming home. To you, to your body, to your breath, to the calm that was always beneath the noise, to the clarity that was always behind the chaos, to the serenity that was always beyond your thoughts. Buddhism teaches that when a human being remembers who they are beyond their mind, suffering loses all authority. And that is the true message of this path. You're not broken. You are not damaged. You are not condemned to live with inner pain forever. Your mind can heal. Your heart can open again. Your inner self can rest. Your present can set you free. Your life can begin again, even now, even here, even in the midst of what you are feeling. Healing begins the moment you decide to stop abandoning yourself. It begins the moment you sit with yourself with the same tenderness you would give to someone you love. It begins when you stop running away from your pain and start listening to it. It begins when you let go of the past and breathe again. It begins when you inhabit the present and discover that there is no suffering in it, only sensations that come and go. And healing becomes real the moment you silently say to yourself for the first time, "I'm here." And that's okay, because that single instant of true presence is enough for the mind to begin to remember the path back to peace.